Okay. All right, back to the koans. Missed last week, so we'll catch up. Case number 33. No mind, no Buddha. So we'll compare and contrast this with 30, with mind is Buddha. And this one is no mind, no Buddha. So main case. What was that? A monk asked Baso, in all earnestness, what is Buddha? Baso replied, no mind, no Buddha. Momon's commentary. If you can see into what was said here, your study is at an end. The verse. If you meet a swordsman, you may present a sword. You should not offer a poem unless you meet a poet. When you speak to others, say only 3/4 of it. You should never give the remaining part. So, what is the difference between mind and no mind? Where do we make those separations, or how do we make those separations? That's what there we go. That's what is really being pointed out here, because there are two other minds in Buddha's koans that we've already gone through. Ordinary mind is the Buddha. Mind is the Buddha. No mind is the Buddha. No mind, no Buddha. So it's the difference is really the situation. The teacher, what's being asked, and the circumstances under what it's being asked. There's a kind of a Zen cliche. It's one teaching in response. So each situation is different. So you may be saying, the same teacher may be saying what sound like contradictory things, but the circumstances and the particular student at that particular time call for a different answer. Because if you're a hammer, then everything's a nail, and that's not very effective if what you're trying to fix doesn't have nails. Or what you need is not, isn't a nail. You need a different tool. So it is really about responding to what is right there in front of you as it is required, being present with the situation just as it is, not as you think it should be. And that's the skill of a Zen master. And this whole mind thing, we get very caught up. This is really the battle zone, if you will, of Zen. Constantly being dragged off by our thoughts into things that are not helpful. Not that they're bad, but they're what you're thinking is always after the fact. It's never about the present moment. It can't be. So this practice is about being awake and paying attention and being present in the now. And that now is in this ever constant flow. It never ends. So, and there's no way to capture that in words, because the words are always late to the game. There's no way to capture it in thought, because it's always late to the game. And Sapolsky even uses, the medical evidence to imagine that, you have no free will because your brain is fired off that it's going to do something before you're even conscious of it doing. I don't think I buy that entirely, but but it is an interesting fact that we've been able to measure the fact that before you can say that I want to do something, the neurons in the brain that actually activate that part of the brain have long since fired. And they can demonstrate that. So, truly, it's before mind or before thought, before perception, where direct experience lies. So, impossible to capture in words, impossible even in thoughts. Um, it's truly before all of that happens. And that's what, and the only way we know how to put that into words is to say, no mind, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. It's because it's really all that stuff happens before it gets there, before we perceive it through the senses. It's already happened, it's already passed. We still have the ability to experience it directly. What we don't have the ability to do is think about it and talk about it in real time. Because what's real time to us is, by the time it reaches our brain, forms a thought, it corrects the grammar, if it does, and it comes out of your mouth, it's several seconds later after the fact. So, and we're also extremely caught up with, so our culture as a whole. We place a lot of credence, a lot of power, a lot of weight on what we think and what our brain can conjure up. We think that is much more important than anything else that we do. It is important, but it's not more important. Our brains have evolved to allow us to survive and get to the top of the food chain, and it hasn't always done that in very nice ways. But here we are. But we're missing that one important aspect is before thought. How did it become that thought? How did it become the intent to do what it is we're going to do? Because that intent also seems to precede thought. So, and we know this because, you put your hand on a stove, your hand is going to snap back off that stove if it's hot before you have a chance to, think and say, ouch. Same thing, a child or your child or someone else's child or a dog runs out into the street, or we see someone, hit their hand with a hammer, and we immediately, even though it didn't happen to us, we have this very visceral reaction to it. And that all happens before we have a chance to form it into words. Bam! Ah! And this is why we have these Zen teachers, Renzai being one of them, who is all about that shout or that whack or that the rock hitting the bamboo, that hollow sound. That sound is, or that direct experience of reality is what sends people over into that level of enlightenment every single time. It's not the thinking about it, not the study, not the words. And the words are beautiful. I mean, we've got some extremely beautifully written poetry and poetic terms, and even some of these koans, the poems that follow the koans, are amazingly, pithy and wonderful to read. I love this one. If you meet a swordsman, you may present a sword. And how better to take care of the situation as you have the situation. You certainly, if you're talking to, the last line, you should not offer a poem unless you meet a poet. People who are not interested in poetry are not going to be, overwhelmed by your poetic response to everything. And when you speak to others, say only 3/4 of it, usually because, we spend way too much time talking. So here's a recipe for cutting it down. Only say 3/4 of what you want to say and leave the rest. But be appropriate to the situation. Meet people where they are. Meet the situation where it is, and respond to that situation with what it calls for. If it calls for a sword, then get your sword. If it calls for a poem, then write a poem. And I think that's it, So when I read this, I thought, oh, this is perfect for what's going on today, because I don't think, poems don't work for National Guardsmen and and the Marines usually. Not that individual Guardsmen and Marines aren't poets; they can be, but that's not their job. And not that I'm advocating violence, but do take care of yourself. You take care of the situation in a way that's effective. That's what this is all about. Please try not to get arrested while you're taking care of that. So, and I love this other line that in the Yamada Roshi translation, the following stream, where it was, the monk asked, "How can I get out of this mountain?" Apparently, this monk had gotten lost in the mountains. He went looking for a mountain. He went looking, and he found this person in a hut. And he asked the person, "How do I get out of this mountain?" And the man says, "Go on following the flow of water." And indeed, by following the stream, the monk could get to the village. But the words of the old man were more than just geographical directions. So he had actually stumbled upon Taibai, who is the one who was enlightened in case 30 from who was the teacher in case 30, the mind, who told him that the mind is the Buddha. And so this monk, he goes back and he tells his teacher, "Oh, this is the directions I got." And he goes, "Oh, that was Taibai, who's Baso." So Baso told Taibai that, Baso asked Taibai, "What is the Buddha?" And Baso answered, "The very mind is Buddha." So Baso is now saying, "No mind, no Buddha." So he sent the monk back and says, test him. So the monk went back and says, are you Taibai? And he goes, "Yes." And Baso has updated his teaching to no mind, no Buddha. Taibai's response is, he was confused. What did he say? I'll read it directly. Unshaken, the old master's reply was, "The great master Baso perplexes many Zen men. He may say no mind, no Buddha, as he will, but for me, it is the very mind is Buddha forever." And Baso's response was, "The plum has ripened." Taibai actually means big plum. So his practice had matured at this point, which is why he was out there in the hut practicing. So basically, the very mind is the Buddha, was what Taibai needed. No mind, no Buddha is what this monk needed. Same teacher, different situation, different student, different way to meet the same need. So, and we have these what feel like contradictions or ambiguities in Zen all the time, and there's no ambiguity in nature. It's only we make it ambiguous by trying to stick to one side or the other, because it's always both. And in this case, the very mind is Buddha and no mind, no Buddha are teaching the same thing. And life is teaching that the same thing, because every situation is going to present itself differently at different times, in different ways, different people. The verse I've done that already. So yeah, that meeting people where they are, I think is the core teaching of koan study. And what koans do is present the exact same truth from several different facets. It's I've heard it compared to the indices of Indra's net. So where Indra's net comes together and is being held together, there's a jewel, and the jewel has many facets. And all those many facets are reflecting all the other many facets that are in all the other jewels that are holding Indra's net together. So you've got this infinite number of ways of looking at the same truth. And that's what koans try to move the very first koan is designed to disrupt discursive thinking and get you out of your head. The whole koan system is designed to give you many tools, many different ways, different number of different ways to approach life, to take care of life, just as it is presenting itself. And sometimes those things are, appear to be contradictory. The mind is Buddha, no mind, no Buddha. Same teaching, same result. Different approaches, different times, different students. Because oneness has never meant sameness. Oneness is an infinite number of differences. All this oneness that we are in is constantly presenting itself in an infinite number of ways. Yamada Roshi also talks about division by the infinite, which is an interesting concept. I had to go to AI. So I said, please define, because if you ask AI, how do you define division by zero, which should, if you have a good calculator, comes up as undefined. If it's a bad calculator, it comes up as zero. Because there's no way to divide by zero. And the difference between zero and the infinite is that infinite is not a number. The infinite is a range of things that have no bounds. So division by the infinite will always get you close to zero, but never all the way to zero. According to AI, I'm not a mathematician. So I had to look that one up. So
well, it would have to be, because
yeah,
it has to be something, not nothing.
Yeah.
So if it's something, then
it can't ever be zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So so dividing by the infinite is what reality is. It is the range of everything, getting very close to zero, but never quite getting there. So that's the number of different ways of approaching life, of approaching the practice, of being present in every single moment, in every single way, with all the people and all the situations that can possibly come up. That's what this is about. Paying attention, one teaching in response, and just being present to that, not being stuck in a rote way of doing it. Now, that is not to say that some teachers didn't have their habits. Gute in his one finger, and then when one of his students tried to imitate him, he chopped his finger off. We hope that's metaphorical, but you never know with some of these Zen masters.
Chop their finger off.
And of course, Rensai was always, ha! His Rensai shout. And with others, it was, whack. It's always whatever will get you out of your thoughts. Rensai the stories of him are just notorious. Who was it? I can't remember the student's name. He was a famous Zen master. He became famous later, but he asked, Rensai, what is the Buddha? And the Rensai got up and punched him. So there it is. That's the answer. So be real, be present, be in this moment, and be careful about asking stupid questions. Because if you don't know that you are the Buddha, a good teacher is going to figure out how to get that through to you by whatever means necessary. And Rensai had his means. Yes.
There seems to be a sensitivity for me that this is like child's play. And these are venerable masters. These people have been on the path a long time. And you contrast that out with the mindset of somebody like the monk coming to the moot koan, the monk, the novitiate, I guess is what they call a younger person on the way. And such an interesting contrast of people asking questions, interfacing in conversations. And I think we've all been there where we really want an answer from somebody. That's kind of the early part of the path. But these guys it seems like there's a dynamic there that's levity, right? This levity movement. Yeah, he's lost. He knows that we've been lost before. So it's, we'll find our way back. But it's like there's this testing or poking or child's play that's going on as they're testing each other in this movement of the koan.
Yeah, I think that's the essence of Dharma combat, because it is a battle, if you will. It's like a student is usually coming in full of ideas and wonder and concepts and
Hope.
and hope. And it's the teacher's job to knock that out of him. Now, you don't do it the same way with every single student, because you could destroy someone. And sometimes people, there are stories of people who've had these extreme breakthroughs and have had a reaction to it that, they never came back from. So the folklore, and I don't know if it's true, but since Tenshin tells the story, I'll believe that it's true. That apparently some woman had a breakthrough and during session and felt so free and relieved that she took off all of her clothes and ran around Yokoji for a while, and then she gathered her stuff and left, and we never saw her again.
Still there.
Yeah.
Was that in the 60s?
Well, it didn't open until early 80s, so, but the people were from the 60s and 70s. So they were carrying that, free love, with them. So there's and Eiken Roshi's commentary about this koan. He talks about a college student that was, and I guess they were at that particular monastery where they were studying. They often, I know Daido Lori also did this, the same thing. Anybody who had a breakthrough in Dosan, it was it was announced to the entire Sangha. Daido used to have people sit in order of when they passed Mu. So you always knew who who passed Mu first, the second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way down the line. I don't know if they ever got, I guess if they had to leave in order to get out of that assigned seat. But so that was kind of a practice in some monasteries to kind of, yeah. So that's what this young man, college student, came to the session and had this major breakthrough, and it got announced, and then he was never heard from again. And Eiken Roshi told this to another teacher and said, "Wow, he must have been very lucky." And the teacher responded, "I have no idea, because it's one thing to have a breakthrough. It's another thing is, what do you do with it? How are you going to use that breakthrough in your life? And if you don't continue practice in some way, now maybe the student went on and practiced someplace else, who knows? But if you don't figure out how to make that work in your life, it will always be this single moment in time that's now past and not currently applicable to the rest of your life. Because the breakthrough is one thing, the practice is a whole other thing. And that's what, it's both sides. When the sixth patriarch, in his competitor, the guy who lost the contest, his poem was all about continuing practice. Good poem, good point, good thing to do. Whereas Huineng's, the sixth patriarch, his poem was about emptiness. So definitely a deeper understanding, and to be able to express that in words was in his poetic works was very good and very deep. It still didn't negate the need for practice. So that's the split, north and southern in China. So Huineng went south and the other one went north, and they both were sixth ancestors for the time that they were, and they had their own successors. Just different approaches, but both those eventually those approaches got melded together. So, which is what created the Mahayana. So the Mahayana is about, you have these what feel like instantaneous breakthroughs, but the where the rubber hits the road is, what are you going to do with all that? You've got this realization, now what? And it's the now what that usually gets lost in in translation, because people think that that's it. Passing, getting through any of the koans, it's these tiny little successive breakthroughs, but there's still the work to be done, the practice to be done, the vows to keep with that. As Tension was very fond of reminding me lately. Every time I see him, it's like, reminding you about your vows. I'm like, yes, teacher. Yes.
Do you find that with music? You said you have a music background.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you're doing improvisation, right, it happens.
Yeah.
Even like with poetry, like, did I write that? And it's very natural and fluid. And then you go to the other part where you're trying to be intentional about it, and that doesn't kind of work. Or it has a different level of output.
Yeah.
The best output, obviously, is when you're not trying to do it, but you've been trained trying to do it to get to the point where it would.
Yeah.
Flow.
Well, even those wonderfully sparkling appearances of musical genius took years of training and practice for that to happen. Who was the blues singer who used to wear a cape? Anyway, the director of my open mic group says, this particular musician, I can't remember his name right now, didn't come out of the womb wearing a cape. He got there by practice and exposure and working at that. Certainly, you're sitting in a jazz ensemble or any kind of ensemble, and where the music isn't necessarily, you've got some idea, you've got some structure that you're working within, either the key structure or a particular style, and you come up with a new way of improvising with that, and it sounds wonderfully instantaneous, and as if it just came out of nothing. But did it? You had to know. Either you studied it, in a traditional way, or you had some exposure to it in some way, and you picked it up by osmosis. There's a lot of musicians who play by ear. A lot of great musicians don't read music, know nothing about music theory, but they're genius musicians. But they've had exposure to it for some time, and they know exactly how that fits and where that works, and where they can just slot that in. And it sounds like instantaneous genius, but it didn't happen just at that moment. That happened after years and years of work and training and listening and being present and being able to do that kind of work. So same thing with enlightenment. You're born enlightened. That's your natural state of being. But then you spend however many years covering that enlightenment up with all kinds of junk that you're taught and and given in culture and society, and then at some point you realize that stuff is meaningless, and you have some breakthrough, and that breakthrough is just the shining through of that inner child, of that inner natural being that is exposing itself. But that stuff was always there. That natural way of being was always there. So it does look like this instant, momentary spark of genius, and it feels that way to people. They're sitting there in after hours and hours and hours and hours of zazen, and suddenly they have this breakthrough, and they've forgotten the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of zazen that they've done to get to that. So I don't know that there's no difference. There's no separation between this gradual and sudden enlightenment, because both require getting through to that natural space that you have always had the entire time.
I always think it's important to keep in mind that enlightenment is not a state, and that as one of the commentaries that we took weeks ago pointed out, is that as we continue to practice, our awarenesses about our own enlightenment experience or our own understanding grow too. So it's layer upon layer upon development over time. So it's not a static thing, it's something that's very dynamic.
Yeah, no, it isn't. It's very, constantly evolving. And what tends to happen is that people get stuck in that they have that experience like, oh, I gotta have that again.
Keep it and not lose it.
Yeah, but they try desperately to hang on to it, but that moment's gone. It is, that's one of the most famous sayings we use in tea is Ichio Ichie, which means one meeting, one time, which is, every encounter that we have, every moment that we have only happens once. And cherish that moment, yes, but move on because the next moment is going to be what it is. But don't get stuck with trying to hold on to or repeat. Thus the I had my neighbors who talk about their enhanced forms of meditation, which is usually mushrooms. And and I'm just like, what are you going to do with that in real life? You can't stay in this psilocybin, fog for, all day long.
Yes, you can.
My mistake. I suppose you can. That would get rather expensive.
Yes, you can.
Well, there was one permanent thing that psilocybin and some really can be PTSD.
Oh yeah.
And reset the response people have from that, and that can be more or less permanent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the medicinal impact of psilocybin is, undeniable. They've done a lot of research. I think it's one of the less damaging of drugs. But I think that if you abuse anything, no matter how good it is, it's going to turn on you
Yeah.
in some way.
It's not meant to be a long-term prescription.
No. No.
But, what's the difference between using and abusing, the question of degree. I would say, that, I did a fair amount of LSD when I was in my 20s, early 30s. And it does, it does, among other things, I think, have you step away from yourself and see things from outside of yourself.
Yeah.
It's a very different perspective. So that's something I've carried with me.
Yeah.
The whole time. That perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, there are several, I'll not tell you their names, but there are 3 teachers in our lineage who attribute their breakthrough to acid. I've never tried it, so I don't know. But, I trust that their experience worked for them.
Yeah, again, people do all kinds of things with it, like you focus on the colors and the patterns, whatever, but you also kind of do it for other things. You can see yourself from another vantage point, an objective, completely stripped of all defenses. That's my experience of it. And other things, there are things that you see are kind of stripped from traditional vantage points.
Yeah, yes.
It was I thought, rewarding.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. And I think that Zazen will do this. It's a much longer process.
Yeah.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, were you referring to James Brown and his?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Oh.
James Brown, that's what James Brown didn't come out of the womb wearing that cape. Thank you.
His dance moves are pretty much beyond enlightenment level. Going down in a split and coming right
And coming back up, yeah.
I don't know how he did that.
Well, it can be done. I've done it as a kid because I watched him and I was like, oh, I need to do that because I loved dancing back then. I couldn't do that now. I could probably get down there, but getting back up would not be possible.
you do half of it.
But that slide, as long as you've got slippery shoes, you do that split, and it's a matter of just pulling your legs back together. It's not that it's easy, but it can be done. There are videos of me doing it.
I was at a beauty parlor waiting for my wife to get her hair done. It can take like 45 minutes. And I'm like, what do I do with my time? So I decided that what I would do is I'd ask every woman that came out of the beauty parlor, what is beauty? What is beauty? It's a very philosophical kind of thing. What is beauty? And I was weird looks and combinations of responses, very, very funny. And the sense was, and that's what we're talking about, the sense was that we know what beauty is when we see it, when we experience it. And that comes up in looking at this mind, right? Because only recently have we had really, really great definitions from neuroscience about what the mind is. In Buddhism, it's kind of not the definition so much, but the direct experience of it. Like, what is mind? Well, you know when you see it, when you experience it. Is that kind of...
That's kind of, and I think that, I don't know how close neurological studies are to actually to defining the mind, because it's not just what's located in the skull. It's not the we know it's not just the brain. The brain does sort of function, but the mind is not just located in the brain. And I think that's what the teachers are alluding to, that experience is not a brain function, not solely a brain function. It happens because the brain serves some purpose as a sense organ, but it's not where all that originates. And we also know that most of what affects the brain is actually located in your gut. So gut bacteria seems to have a tremendous impact on how your brain is functioning. We know that that's true. We don't know why, but that's part of. So the brain, and what's his name? WaYu Dharma's successor, basically got told, or when he said my mind is troubled, and WaYu Dharma said, well, bring me your mind. And and he said, I can't find it. Then he said, I've settled your mind for you, because can't find it. So
Here's the definition. What the definition? I'll give you one that's more. But we'll change it. We won't say mind. We'll say Zen practice in place of mind. It's embodied. It's relational. It's emergent. It's self-organizing. And it's a process that regulates the flow of energy and information. That's one of the definitions. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's all that and not.
But it's closer.
Yeah. Well, boiling it down to any sort of objective definition is never going to work. Because all this talk, no, it's not going to get you there. You have to do it. You have to do the work. You have to do the practice. You've got to sit on the cushion, take that realization into everyday life, and never separate yourself from that direct experience. And that can't be captured in words. 1,700 koans, good practice, waste of time. I speak from experience. All right. Any other questions, comments?
Yes. You mentioned Dino Roshi.
Yeah.
And I've been reminded of a story just listening to this, that I had an experience at Zen Mountain Monastery. I talked to a nun there once, and she had gotten really into Ikebana, and that was her breakthrough.
Yeah.
And she, for a while, when you got there was this big display, there's a big arrangement that she had done, and that was her kind of way of getting out of herself and being in the moment and just being spontaneous. And one day, Daido Roshi tore the Ikebana down that she had just totally destroyed it
Yeah.
and didn't say anything. That was it. And then she had another breakthrough and she stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
What the issues are.
Flower arrangement.
Okay.
Yeah. It is a practice that comes out as in school, like I study Chado, and they're very interesting experiences. And just this a couple weeks ago, we did tea at Senior Center in West LA, and I was hanging out. I intentionally did not wear my kimono because if I wear my kimono, they end up asking me to do shit. So this was my passive aggressive way of getting out of being out on stage. I just wanted to help out in the back. That's all I wanted to do. And so I was, oh no, where's your kimono? I didn't wear it. So I get to be back here. So, and coordinating and being in what's called the mesia, which is the water room, being in the mesia of a tea ceremony is a very interesting experience for me. I love it because it really makes me pay attention to everything that is going on, because I have to know the timing of when the demonstration happens so that I know when to, because the bowls have to be warmed. I have to put tea in the bowls. I have to put water in the bowls. I have to whisk the tea for the rest of the group, because the person doing the demonstration is only making 2 bowls of tea. I've got 20 people that I'm making tea for, and the timing of that has to be in such a way. So it's not a single focus, but it's this wonderfully broad focus that I've come to love doing. I specifically asked to be in the mesia for the demonstration we're doing tomorrow, and they refused. So they're making me wear my kimono. But but you can get kind of stuck in that practice, and think that that's all that there is, instead of paying attention to all the other aspects.
Well, I'm just thinking about you saying, you have your breakthrough, but
Yeah.
that's not now. That's 5 minutes, 10 minutes ago,
Yeah.
15 minutes ago,
Or 15 years ago when you started doing Yamada.
Yeah.
So, and the test is, how does that inform you today, this moment? What does that do? How will you use that breakthrough? So now that I've just destroyed all of the beautiful flower arrangements that you put up here, now what? And she did not give up or run away, because a lot of people would have. They would have said, they would have got mad at Dido, screamed at Dido, how dare you destroy not only my flowers, but my practice.
Yes.
You've destroyed my practice.
Yes.
And they accuse him, and they go running off and mad for the rest of their lives. But no, she applied the practice of Ikebana to not having Ikebana. And that's what Zazen is to do. Not just on the cushion. It is about taking what you get on the cushion into every single situation in your life. Okay. Enough for me. Questions, comments, Steve?
I had kind of a comment question. So I'm feeling that you're saying that even direct experience we have to recognize as fleeting. Insights are fleeting.
Yep.
Mind is fleeting. And so that's kind of the practice, would you say?
Yes,
To recognize
exactly.
that and then detach. Okay.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll edit the word fleeting, because it sounds like it's running away. It's flowing,
Okay.
because you can never stick the same hand to the same river twice.
I
You're
like
in that constant flow.
Okay.
Or the diamond suture, the mind is the past is ungraspable, present is ungraspable, future is ungraspable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your enlightenment is ungraspable. Great. Did that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Any other final thoughts before we head back? You're welcome. Head back out into the war zone. Or at least I'm going back to the war zone, since I live near downtown. Okay, that's it for today.